Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Buckley, an AMFT solution-focused parenting strategist, family systems coach, and sports psychology-informed ADHD specialist. I've been with my husband for over 3 decades, and together we've raised a thriving 23-year-old neurodivergent son whose journey continues to shape the work I do with families every single day. If your child is struggling with ADHD, OCD, anxiety, or executive functioning challenges, or if you're a young adult trying to understand your own patterns, this is the place for you. Let's get started. Every family has a rhythm predictable ways members interact, react, and compensate for one another. But in families where ADHD, anxiety, OCD, or emotional dysregulation is present, that rhythm often becomes uneven. Without realizing it, the family begins a circular dance known as overfunctioning and underfunctioning, a dynamic in which one person steps in too much while another steps back too far. This shows up in marriages, in parent-child relationships, and even between siblings. It is one of the most common patterns I see in homes trying to manage ADHD, and it develops for a simple reason. The system is trying to survive, not thrive. When the environment feels unstable, someone naturally takes on more than their share to keep things afloat, while another unconsciously retreats because the work is already being handled for them. Overfunctioning occurs when a person consistently takes on more responsibility, emotionally, mentally, or practically, than is realistic or sustainable. This parent anticipates every meltdown, preps everything in advance to avoid chaos, keeps rigid structure because no one else will, remembers all appointments, forms, and deadlines, guides therapy schedules, manages the emotional climate of the home, fills in every gap the child or spouse struggles with, and ultimately carries both the mental and emotional load of the family. It looks organized, it looks mature, it looks like someone who has it all together. But beneath that surface, it is exhausting. The overfunctioning parent often feels alone, unseen, resentful, or guilty. Guilty because they fear that if they stop overfunctioning, the whole system will collapse. That belief becomes the hook that keeps the pattern alive. Underfunctioning, on the other hand, happens when someone consistently does less not out of laziness, but because they are overwhelmed, ashamed, avoidant, fearful of failure, or limited by executive functioning challenges. Underfunctioning in ADHD families appears as procrastination, forgetting, shutting down, withdrawing, melting down, letting others take the lead, doing the bare minimum to avoid conflict, or retreating from anything that feels too big or emotionally risky. Young adults with ADHD often underfunction because they battle internal barriers like emotional intensity, perfectionism, task initiation challenges, fear of disappointing parents, anxiety around expectations, sensory overload, or shame from past failures. And as the underfunctioner retreats, the overfunctioner compensates harder, which pushes the underfunctioner even further into passivity. The two roles lock each other in place. This intensifies this dynamic because it creates executive functioning gaps that affect planning, sequencing, organization, follow-through, emotional regulation, and stress tolerance. These gaps aren't moral failings, they are neurological realities. They make it harder for the individual with ADHD to step into responsibility consistently. Meanwhile, the overfunctioning parent who genuinely loves the child steps in repeatedly to prevent failure, frustration, or emotional collapse. Both sides are reacting to the brain, not each other. The child is not choosing to underfunction. The parent is not choosing to overfunction. The system is attempting to stabilize itself. Examples of this pattern unfold every day in ordinary moments. In the morning routine, when a child struggles to get out of bed, get dressed, or pack their backpack, the parent eventually steps in with, "Fine, I'll just do it. We're running late," inadvertently taking away opportunities for the child to practice initiation. During homework, when the child melts down or avoids starting, the parent jumps in, sits next to them, and guides every step. The child learns that they need the parent to function academically. When the child faces emotional dysregulation, the parent becomes the emotional container, absorbing all the intensity and guiding the entire process. In marriages, the pattern becomes even more pronounced when one spouse handles the appointments, bills, schedules, communication with school, and overall emotional management because the ADHD spouse is inconsistent, overwhelmed, or avoids tasks that trigger shame. Slowly, the partnership shifts into a parent-child dynamic rather than a spouse-to-spouse alliance. Over time, these patterns profoundly affect young adults. Underfunctioning children become young adults who freeze, procrastinate, and avoid responsibility because they fear they cannot handle life without someone stepping in, or who feel so anxious about disappointing others that they avoid responsibility entirely. Overfunctioning parents, meanwhile, often feel exhausted, emotionally invisible, disconnected from their partner, overly responsible for their child's success, and terrified to let go because they've internalized the belief that everything will fall apart without their constant vigilance. Both sides feel trapped in roles they do not want, and both feel misunderstood. When overfunctioning and underfunctioning patterns form around the child with ADHD, the other children in the home are also deeply affected, often in quiet, invisible ways that don't fully reveal themselves until adolescence or young adulthood. Siblings without ADHD can internalize their own distorted roles within the family system, and these roles are shaped not by who they are, but by the way the family must constantly reorganize around the needs, emotions, and challenges of the neurodivergent child. Some non-ADHD siblings become the easy child, the one who stays quiet, stays out of the way, gets good grades, avoids adding stress, and minimizes their own needs to reduce the burden on their already stretched parents. They learn to disappear in subtle ways, and as they grow older, they often describe feeling unseen, overly self-sufficient, or guilty for needing anything at all. Their competence becomes their camouflage. Others become the high achiever, overdeveloping responsibility to counterbalance the chaos. They self-impose perfection, take on adult-like behaviors, and may struggle later with anxiety, rigidity, or difficulty tolerating failure. These children are often praised for being mature, but inside they carry a level of tension that mirrors the overfunctioning parent. Some siblings become the resentful child, internalizing the belief that the ADHD sibling receives more attention, more exceptions, or more compassion. Even in loving homes, resentment grows when siblings consistently witness one child being rescued or excused while they themselves are expected to self-regulate or manage more independently. This resentment can harden into distance not only from the sibling with ADHD, but from the parents, and a small but important group become the forgotten child, overshadowed by the intense emotional energy the household directs toward the sibling with ADHD. These children may begin acting out not because they are oppositional, but because misbehavior becomes their only reliable route to visibility. Regardless of the role they adopt, siblings living in an overfunctioning/underfunctioning dynamic often share two long-term experiences. They learn to suppress their own emotional needs, and they learn to orient around the dysregulation of others rather than the truth of themselves. As adults, siblings raised in this dynamic may struggle with boundary setting, emotional expression, or asking for help. They may carry guilt for wanting attention or support. Some become overfunctioners in their own relationships. Others become fiercely independent in ways that isolate them, and some repeat the same family patterns, unconsciously partnering with someone who mirrors the emotional inconsistency they grew up around. When families begin rebalancing the system sharing responsibility more evenly, reducing rescuing, and creating more predictable scaffolding, siblings begin to soften too. They feel safer expressing needs, they feel more included in the family structure, and they no longer feel like background characters in a story that was never meant to center only one child. Breaking the overfunctioning/underfunctioning cycle requires conscious repair. The first step is naming the pattern out loud, saying something like, "We're stuck in an overfunctioning/underfunctioning loop, and we need to rebalance," immediately shifts the issue from being about the person to being about the pattern. Next comes reassigning responsibilities to developmentally appropriate levels. This means resisting the urge to rescue, step in at the first sign of discomfort, or complete tasks for the child. Instead, the parent provides scaffolding support that still requires the child to do the actual work, allowing skills to develop gradually. Creating predictable routines and visual structures is another essential step because ADHD thrives on clarity, externalization, and consistency. Visual cues, checklists, step-by-step systems, and fewer verbal commands provide stability and reduce the need for the overfunctioning parent to micromanage everything. And then comes one of the most powerful corrections, allowing the child or young adult to experience natural effort. Not punishment, not harsh consequences, but the simple internal win of doing something independently. Even small successes shift identity. This is where authentic confidence begins. Growth requires tolerating the discomfort that both roles avoid. The underfunctioning parent fears imperfection and failure, while the overfunctioning parent fears chaos and loss of control. Real progress emerges when the family normalizes slower progress, mild frustration, small failures, emotional discomfort, and imperfect attempts. Executive functions strengthen only through practice, not rescue. Finally, the overfunctioning parent needs support. Letting go is emotionally difficult. Allowing the child to struggle even a little feels scary, and regulating their own nervous system becomes part of the healing. A burned-out, overfunctioning parent cannot rebalance the home. They first need compassion, boundaries, and relief. Ultimately, overfunctioning and underfunctioning are not personal flaws, but survival strategies that emerge when stress exceeds capacity. ADHD does not cause these patterns, but it certainly intensifies them. The encouraging truth is that patterns are learned, which means they can be unlearned. When every member of the family takes back only their rightful responsibilities, the system becomes healthier. Parents feel lighter, children feel more capable, young adults start believing in their own competence. The whole family shifts from survival mode into developmental mode. This is how you build a home where growth becomes possible. Thank you for listening to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. If today's episode gave you clarity or helped you understand your family system in a new way, share it with someone who needs it. For more tools, resources, and parent coaching support, visit thepathtopeacetherapy.com or connect with me on Instagram at thepathtopeacetherapy. And remember, small shifts lead to big change. I'll see you in the next episode.